My siblings have been excluding me from every group chat and family decision since I turned 18. They went ballistic when I bought my own house without consulting them. I'm 26 now, and for the past 8 years, my family has operated like I don't exist. There's a group chat called Family First with my parents, my older brother Dylan, my sister Olivia, and Dylan's wife Candace. I know about it because Olivia accidentally sent me a screenshot once while complaining about mom's dinner plans. When I asked about joining the chat, she said it was just for core family members, and I'd be added when appropriate. That was 3 years ago. They make every decision without me. When Dad had his heart attack last year, I found out from a Facebook post Dylan made asking for prayers. While I was panicking and calling hospitals, they were already at his bedside making medical decisions as a family unit. When I finally showed up, Mom acted surprised to see me. "Oh, honey, we didn't want to worry you," she said, like I'm some fragile outsider instead of their daughter. The nurses looked confused about why I wasn't listed as emergency contact. Last month, they sold our childhood home without telling me. I drove by to drop off Mom's birthday gift and saw a sold sign in the yard. 26 years of memories, gone. When I called Olivia crying, she said they'd been discussing it for months and assumed I wouldn't be interested since I never come around anymore. I never come around because every time I show up, they're already deep in conversations I wasn't included in, making references to discussions I wasn't part of. The exclusion is so systematic, it's almost impressive. Christmas planning happens without me until someone remembers to send a "we're doing Christmas at Dylan's this year" text 2 days before vacation planning, birthday parties for the grandkids, even Mom's retirement party last year. I got an invitation like any other guest, not like family who should have been helping plan it. Dylan gave a speech thanking his sister and brother-in-law for organizing everything. I sat there realizing he was talking about Candace, not me. But here's what finally broke me. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a realtor named Patricia Winston asking if I was interested in selling my share of the family lake house. I said there must be a mistake, because we didn't have a lake house. She paused and said my father had listed me as part owner of a property they were liquidating. Turns out, my grandfather left all 4 grandchildren equal shares in his old cabin when he died 5 years ago. I never knew it existed. I called Dad immediately. He admitted they'd been using the cabin for family weekends and holidays since Grandpa died, splitting the maintenance costs 3 ways. "We didn't think you'd want to be bothered with the upkeep expenses," he said. They'd been making memories at my inheritance while I was home alone, thinking my family just didn't like spending time with me. When I asked how much money they'd put into repairs, Dad got quiet. "Maybe $15,000 each," he said. Money I should have been contributing, time I should have been spending there. That night, I called Patricia back and told her I wasn't interested in selling. I wanted to buy out my siblings' shares instead. She seemed surprised but ran the numbers. With recent improvements, the property was worth about $400,000. My siblings' combined 75% would cost me $300,000. I had been saving for years to buy a house, living in the same cramped apartment since college while my family grew their wealth together, but I had exactly $320,000 in my house fund plus investment accounts. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. For the first time in 8 years, I made a family decision without consulting them. Patricia handled everything quietly, and within 10 days, I owned our grandfather's lake house outright. I drove out there on a Saturday morning with my spare key to see what they'd built without me. The place was gorgeous. They'd renovated the kitchen, added a deck, installed central air photos on the walls, showed family gatherings I'd never been invited to. Birthday parties, anniversaries, graduations. 8 years of my family's life happening an hour from my apartment. I changed the locks that afternoon and posted new no trespassing signs. Then I called a cleaning service to clear out everyone else's belongings. Olivia had a whole room set up like it was her personal retreat. Dylan's kids had claimed the loft as their playroom. Candace had turned the pantry into some kind of craft storage area. I had everything packed and ready for pickup. Then sent a group text to each of them separately since I still wasn't in their precious group chat. "Hey, your stuff from the lake house is boxed and ready on the front porch. New locks are installed. Thanks for taking such good care of my property." I sent it to Dylan, Olivia, and my parents simultaneously, then turned off my phone and drove home. By the time I turned it back on 3 hours later, I had 47 missed calls and about 30 text messages. The rage was immediate and spectacular. Dylan called me screaming about how I'd destroyed the family over petty jealousy. He said I was being vindictive and cruel, taking away his children's favorite place out of spite. Olivia left a voicemail crying about how the lake house was where she went to clear her head, how I was ruining everything good in our family. Candace texted that I was unhinged and should be ashamed of myself for hurting the kids. Dad called and demanded I return everyone's key immediately, saying I was being unreasonable and hurtful. But the most telling response came from Mom. She left this long voicemail about family loyalty and working together, how Grandpa would be spinning in his grave, knowing I'd locked out my siblings. She said the lake house was meant to bring us together, not tear us apart. At the end, she said she was disappointed in me for making such a big decision without talking to the family first. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. 8 years of being excluded from every family decision. And suddenly, I'm the villain for making one on my own. The next morning, Dylan showed up at my apartment pounding on the door. When I opened it, his face was red and he was shaking with anger. "You need to fix this right now," he said, pushing past me into my living room. "The kids are heartbroken. Candace is talking about not coming to Christmas because of what you did." He stood there in my space, demanding I undo the one decision I'd made for myself in nearly a decade. I asked him to sit down, and for the next hour, I laid out every exclusion, every missed conversation, every time they'd made me feel like an outsider in my own family. I showed him screenshots of group photos posted on social media where I was cropped out of family events. I pulled up the Facebook posts about Dad's heart attack where strangers knew more about his condition than I did. I explained how it felt to discover my inheritance had been their secret vacation spot for 5 years. Dylan listened, but I could see him getting defensive. He said I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that families have different levels of involvement. He claimed they didn't include me because I seemed uninterested in family drama and they were protecting me from stress. When I asked why they never once asked what I wanted, he said they assumed I preferred being independent. He actually used the word assumed 12 times in that conversation, like 8 years of assumptions justified systematically cutting me out. The conversation ended with Dylan storming out, saying I'd made my choice and would have to live with the consequences. He said the family was done trying to include someone who clearly didn't want to be part of it. The projection was stunning. They'd spent 8 years excluding me, then painted my one act of independence as proof that I was the one rejecting them. But I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: control over my own life. That week, I started looking at houses for real. Not lake houses or family properties, but my own place where I could make decisions without consulting anyone. I found a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood I'd always admired, about 30 minutes from my job. It had hardwood floors, a huge kitchen, and a backyard perfect for entertaining. The asking price was $385,000, right in my budget after the lake house purchase. I put in an offer that same day. The seller accepted immediately, and I scheduled the inspection for the following Monday. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a major decision completely independently. No family input, no group discussions, no committee votes. Just me, choosing my own future. I called my realtor, my loan officer, my insurance agent. I picked contractors for minor repairs and started planning renovations. It felt incredible to have conversations about my life that didn't require anyone else's approval. 2 weeks later, I got the keys to my house. I took a photo of myself on the front steps and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Home Sweet Home," and a key emoji. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with comments from friends and coworkers congratulating me. My college roommate wrote, "So proud of you." My boss commented about how exciting it was to become a homeowner. Neighbors from my apartment building liked the post and said they'd miss me. But the family response was immediate and nuclear. Olivia called within an hour, her voice shaking with rage. "Are you kidding me right now?" she screamed. "You bought a house without telling anyone? What is wrong with you?" She said I was acting insane and demanded to know why she had to find out on social media. Like some stranger, I reminded her that she'd been making family decisions without me for 8 years, so I figured I'd return the favor. Dylan called next, and his anger was even more intense. He said I was completely out of control and needed to get help for my obvious mental health issues. He demanded I explain why I thought it was appropriate to make such a massive decision without family input. When I pointed out that he'd bought 2 houses and a vacation condo without asking my opinion, he said that was completely different because I wasn't financially involved in his purchases. The irony of his argument seemed completely lost on him. Dad's call came that evening, and his disappointment was somehow worse than Dylan's rage. He said he was hurt, that I didn't trust my family enough to include them in such an important milestone. He talked about how they'd always been there for me and couldn't understand why I was pulling away now. When I mentioned the lake house situation, he said that was ancient history and I needed to move forward instead of holding grudges. But Mom's reaction surprised me most. She showed up at my new house uninvited the next morning, standing on my porch with tears in her eyes. She said she felt like she was losing me and didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She walked through every room, commenting on my choices like she was cataloging evidence of my defection from the family. "This is such a big house for one person," she said. "You could have talked to us about what you needed. We could have helped you find something more suitable." The word suitable stuck with me for days. Suitable to whom? Suitable for what? I'd bought a house I loved in a neighborhood I chose with money I'd saved through my own work. But to my mother, it wasn't suitable because they hadn't approved it first. The house represented something they couldn't control, and that made them panic in ways I was only beginning to understand. Over the next few weeks, the family campaign to bring me back into line intensified. Olivia started sending me articles about the importance of family communication and making major decisions together. She forwarded me blog posts about how isolation leads to poor judgment and why successful people always consult their support networks. Each article felt like a passive-aggressive lecture disguised as sisterly concern. Dylan took a different approach, showing up at my house with his kids on Saturday morning. He claimed they were in the neighborhood and wanted to see Aunt's new place, but I could tell it was a strategic visit. The kids ran around talking about how big everything was, how I must be lonely in such a huge house, how they missed coming to family gatherings where I was present. It was manipulation through innocent questions from children who had no idea they were being used. Dad tried the practical approach, calling with concerns about my finances. He wanted to know how I was managing the mortgage payments, whether I'd considered property taxes and homeowners insurance, if I had enough savings left for emergencies. Every question was designed to make me feel like I'd made an impulsive mistake that would inevitably require family rescue. When I told him my finances were stable and well-planned, he seemed disappointed rather than relieved. The breaking point came 3 weeks after I'd moved in. I was hosting my first dinner party, celebrating my promotion at work with colleagues who'd become close friends over the years. We were having a wonderful time in my new dining room, sharing stories and laughing over wine, when my family showed up, all of them, unannounced and uninvited, standing on my porch like an intervention team. Dylan rang the doorbell while my guests watched through the front windows. When I opened the door, he pushed past me with Mom, Dad, Olivia, and Candace following behind. "We need to talk," he announced to my living room full of coworkers. "Family meeting, now." My boss looked mortified. My colleagues started gathering their purses and making excuses to leave early within 10 minutes. My celebration was ruined and my house was empty except for 5 angry family members. "Sit down," Mom said, pointing to my own couch. "We're going to settle this tonight." For the next 2 hours, they took turns explaining why my recent behavior was unacceptable and how I needed to fix my attitude about family involvement. They presented a united front, each person building on the other's arguments like they'd rehearsed this confrontation, which they probably had in their group chat I still wasn't part of. Olivia led with emotional manipulation, crying about how much she missed the old me, who used to care about family harmony. She said I'd become selfish and distant, more concerned with making points than maintaining relationships. She brought up childhood memories of us being close, asking what had happened to the sister who used to value family above everything else. It was expertly crafted to make me feel guilty for growing up and developing my own priorities. Dylan focused on practical concerns, listing all the ways my recent decisions had hurt the family. The lake house situation had cost them thousands in planned improvements they could no longer make. My house purchase had sent a message that I didn't value their opinions or want them involved in my life. He said my behavior was divisive and threatened the unity that had always made our family strong. Every point was designed to make my independence sound like an attack on them. Dad took the authority approach, reminding me that families make major decisions together because that's how you build trust and maintain support systems. He said I was acting like a stranger instead of a daughter, making choices that affected everyone without considering the broader implications. He wanted me to explain my sudden change in personality and commit to including them in future decisions. The idea that excluding me for 8 years might have changed our dynamic never seemed to occur to him. Candace surprised me by speaking up at all. She usually stayed quiet during family conflicts, but tonight she had opinions about my selfishness. She said I was setting a terrible example for Dylan's children, showing them that family commitments were optional and personal desires mattered more than group harmony. She pointed out that the kids looked up to me and my recent behavior was confusing them about family loyalty. Using the children as leverage felt particularly low. But Mom delivered the final blow with surgical precision. She said she was heartbroken that the daughter she'd raised to value family above all else had become someone she barely recognized. She talked about all the sacrifices the family had made over the years to support each other, and how my recent actions showed I didn't appreciate or understand those sacrifices. She ended by saying she was worried about my mental health and thought I might need professional help to work through whatever was making me act out like this. I sat there listening to 2 hours of coordinated criticism, watching my family dissect my personality and pathologize my independence. Not once did anyone acknowledge the 8 years of exclusion that had led to this moment. Not once did anyone apologize for making decisions without me or admit that their group chat system had made me feel like an outsider. Instead, they'd turned my response to their behavior into evidence that I was the problem. When they finally finished talking, I looked around at their expectant faces. They clearly expected an apology, a promise to include them in future decisions, maybe even an offer to sell the house and start over with their input. Instead, I stood up and walked to my front door. "Thank you for making this so clear," I said, opening it wide. "Please leave my house now." The shock on their faces was almost worth 8 years of exclusion. Dylan tried to argue, saying we weren't finished talking, but I cut him off. "Yes, we are. You've spent 8 years making family decisions without me, and I've spent tonight listening to you explain why that was justified. Now I'm making a decision without you. Leave." Mom started crying, saying I was breaking her heart, but I held firm. "You broke my heart first repeatedly, for 8 years. Now you can experience what it feels like to be excluded." One by one, they filed out, each person stopping to deliver one final comment designed to make me reconsider. Olivia said I was making a huge mistake and would regret pushing them away. Dylan warned that I was burning bridges I couldn't rebuild. Dad said he was disappointed, but hoped I'd come to my senses before I destroyed our relationships permanently. Candace just shook her head like I was a lost cause. Mom was the last to leave, turning back to say, "This isn't over. You're still our daughter. whether you like it or not. I locked the door behind them and stood in my empty living room, surrounded by the dinner party aftermath they'd interrupted. Dirty wine glasses and abandoned dessert plates covered my new dining table. My colleagues' congratulations cards were scattered across the coffee table where my family had tossed their coats. But instead of feeling sad or guilty, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I'd enforced boundaries with my family and survived. The next morning, I called my friend Jessica, who'd been at the dinner party when my family arrived. She came over with coffee and pastries, and we spent hours talking about family dynamics and boundary setting. Jessica had grown up in a similar situation where her siblings treated her like an outsider, and she'd eventually had to choose between her sanity and their approval. "It's not about being right or wrong," she said. "It's about protecting yourself from people who don't respect you, even when those people are family." That conversation led to me finding Dr. Rachel Summers, a therapist who specialized in family systems and adult children. Our first session was like getting a diagnosis for a condition I'd never had words for. Dr. Summers explained how some families create scapegoats, turning one member into the problem so the others can avoid examining their own dysfunction. She said my siblings' exclusion tactics were classic examples of emotional manipulation designed to maintain power and control. Over the next few months, therapy helped me understand that my family's anger wasn't really about the lake house or my new home. It was about losing their ability to control my narrative and make decisions for me by acting independently. I'd disrupted their system and forced them to confront their own behavior. Their rage was proportional to their fear of losing the power dynamic they'd established over 8 years of systematically excluding me. During this time, my family's campaign to bring me back into line intensified in predictable ways. They started with guilt, having mutual friends reach out to ask if I was okay, and suggest I might be going through something difficult. When that didn't work, they tried bargaining, with Olivia offering to add me to some of their group chats if I started participating more positively in family activities. The condescension was breathtaking. When bargaining failed, they escalated to punishment. I stopped receiving invitations to family events entirely. Birthday parties for Dylan's kids happened without me, and I only learned about them through social media posts. Mom's annual Christmas cookie exchange, which I'd attended for 15 years, suddenly didn't include me on the guest list. They were showing me what complete exclusion looked like, as if partial exclusion had been a privilege I'd taken for granted. The holidays that year were the first I'd spent entirely alone, and they were blissful. Instead of walking into rooms full of people who treated me like an outsider, I made my own plans. I volunteered at a local shelter on Thanksgiving, worked on home improvement projects over Christmas weekend, and hosted a New Year's Eve party for friends who actually enjoyed my company. Each holiday confirmed that I was happier alone than I'd ever been as my family's scapegoat. 6 months after buying my house, I got an unexpected call from my cousin Rachel, Dad's brother's daughter. She was calling from Portland, where she lived with her husband and kids. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Have you been invited to Uncle David's retirement party next month?" I hadn't even known Dad was retiring, let alone that there was a party planned. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "They told us you couldn't make it because you were dealing with some personal issues and preferred not to be contacted right now." That phone call led to a series of conversations with extended family members who'd been told various versions of why I wasn't present at recent gatherings. Some heard I was going through a difficult phase and needed space. Others were told I was focusing on my career and didn't have time for family events. A few cousins thought I was dealing with mental health problems, and the family was giving me privacy to work through them. My parents and siblings had systematically rewritten my story to explain my absence without admitting they'd excluded me. Rachel's husband Mark was a family therapist, and he offered some perspective that changed everything for me. "What you're describing is called triangulation," he said during a 3-way call with Rachel. "Your family is controlling information flow to manage how everyone else sees the situation. They're making themselves look like the victims while painting you as unstable or problematic. It's a classic manipulation tactic to maintain their preferred narrative." That conversation prompted me to reach out to other family members directly, sharing my actual story, rather than the version my parents and siblings had created. The response was immediate and eye-opening. Aunt Patricia said she'd wondered why I never seemed interested in family gatherings anymore. Cousin Michael mentioned that he'd tried to invite me to his wedding, but was told I was going through something and might not be up for celebrations. Uncle Tom's wife Janet said she'd been confused by my sudden absence from holiday photos and family updates. As the truth spread through our extended family, the reaction split along predictable lines. Older relatives tended to side with my parents, emphasizing the importance of family unity and suggesting I should work things out regardless of who was right or wrong. But younger cousins, especially those who'd experienced similar dynamics in their own families, were overwhelmingly supportive. They shared their own stories of being excluded, controlled, or manipulated by family members who claimed to act in their best interests. The most validating response came from my grandmother, Dad's mother, who was 89 and sharp as ever. She called me directly after hearing about the situation from multiple sources. "Honey," she said in her no-nonsense voice, "I've been watching this family for 9 decades, and what your siblings are doing isn't new. Your father was the same way growing up, always needing to be in control, always making decisions for everyone else. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That house of yours sounds lovely. That validation from the family matriarch shifted something in the broader family dynamic. Suddenly, my independence looked less like rebellion and more like strength. Cousins started reaching out to make plans that didn't include my parents and siblings. Aunts and uncles began inviting me to events directly rather than assuming my parents would handle family communications. For the first time in my adult life, I had family relationships that existed independently of my siblings' approval. A year after buying my house, I hosted my first family gathering. Not for my parents and siblings, but for the extended family members who'd supported me through the transition. Rachel flew in from Portland with her husband and kids. Cousin Michael brought his new wife, who I was finally getting to know. Aunt Patricia came with her famous potato salad, and Uncle Tom showed up with his guitar for the inevitable sing-along that happened at every family gathering. The house was full of laughter, conversation, and people who genuinely wanted to be there. Kids ran around the backyard while adults caught up on each other's lives. No one walked on eggshells or worried about saying the wrong thing. No secret group chats coordinated the guest list or menu planning. It was just family, enjoying each other's company without the toxic dynamics that had poisoned so many previous gatherings. Dylan drove by twice during the party, slowing down to see the cars in my driveway and the people in my backyard. The second time, Cousin Michael noticed and mentioned it to the group. Some people just can't let go, he said, shaking his head. They create drama, exclude people, then get upset when those people find happiness elsewhere. It's like they'd rather see you miserable than independent. That evening, after everyone left and I was cleaning up, I found a card on my kitchen counter. Aunt Patricia had left it, thanking me for hosting and telling me how proud she was of the person I'd become. Your grandmother was right, she'd written. You've got strength that runs deep in this family, even if some people can't see it. Keep building the life you want. The right people will always find their way to your table. 3 years later, my house has become the unofficial headquarters for the healthier branch of our family tree. Cousins crash in my guest rooms when they're in town. Holiday gatherings rotate between my place, Rachel's when we visit Portland, and Aunt Patricia's for the really big occasions. The group chat that coordinates these events includes 12 people who actually want to spend time together, share responsibilities, and support each other through life's challenges. My parents and siblings continued their group chat and exclusive family dynamic, but their circle kept shrinking as relatives chose sides or simply got tired of the drama. Dylan's marriage to Candace ended in divorce 2 years ago, partly due to stress from family conflicts that never seemed to resolve. Olivia moved across the country for a job and rarely visits mom and dad spend holidays increasingly alone, wondering why their family fell apart, apparently unable to connect their behavior to the consequences they're experiencing. I learned that building boundaries isn't about punishing people who hurt you. It's about protecting yourself from people who don't respect you, even when those people are family. The lake house sits empty most of the time now, visited occasionally by me and whatever family members I choose to invite. The house I bought without consulting them has become the foundation for healthier relationships and authentic connections with people who celebrate my independence rather than punish it.